Good morning. Hope everybody's doing okay. I don't see Mark on here yet. I'll skin that boy's hide to remind him. Trevor, how you feeling?
Pretty good.
Almost missed you. Oh,
Well, I had an interesting day yesterday. I was on my way up the mountain for our lab, and my wife calls me, and she hadn't been feeling good for the last 2 days, so she went to the doctor. The first thing they done was a COVID test. So when they do that, I have to report in, and so I have been banned from the campus until we find out one way or the other. And
I didn't think you were coming out here anyhow.
what's that?
I didn't think you were coming out here anyhow.
Yeah, oh yeah, I was coming out Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, but so I won't know. For our lab on Thursday, I won't know the results of that test. I don't guess, but according to the weather, it don't look like we're going to be doing much on Thursday anyway.
Yeah, Carlos just told me it's supposed to be really icy and cold.
Yeah, they're talking about 100% worth of precipitation, and it ain't supposed to get above 30 degrees. So whatever we get, it's going to be frozen.
Yep.
My daughter lives in Dallas, Texas. She's been without power for 2 days now. And bless her heart, she's just in a terrible heat right now. She lives in an apartment and everything's electric. Good morning, Mark. This is Pick on Mark Day.
Anderson. Mr. Anderson.
All right, so I'm going to give him, make him a co-host and let you take it away.
Ready? All right.
Well, she just texted me and said she ain't got no running water either.
No. All right. You ready, Eric?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Good morning. This morning I'm going to be discussing with you the concept of earth sheltered homes.
Some of our stuff may overlap because I'm doing underground.
Very likely, so there's a lot of interconnected concepts. The overall purpose of an earth sheltered home is to take advantage of the high thermal mass of the earth. Soil has an R value between 0.25 and 0.5 per inch, and that is affected by the moisture content, compaction, various factors. In the long term, an earth sheltered home has a very small footprint, because you are reestablishing the soil on top of the home for the most part. So our thermal mass advantage is especially prevalent in the summer. In the winter, it's going to cut down the amount that we have to heat the home. In this example, we see that on a -20 day in the winter, an earth home would only have to be heated about 30 degrees. to get to a comfortable 70. And in the summertime, we would have to cool it 0. So that would be a huge energy saver. Some of the simple design concepts of an earth shelter home are some insulation, which can be very minimal depending on your climate and how complex you want to make the home. Ventilation, which is crucial, and utilizing passive heat through a lot of the passive design concepts that were discussed Monday. So when I say air circulation is crucial, it means very, very crucial. You can do this via natural air circulation by either just having some sort of vent, and the stack effect will naturally circulate air through the house. This can be climate dependent on whether you want to utilize that or not. Most of the modern earth shelter homes that I saw did have a mechanical air circulation, at least as a backup. And that can be just some kind of exhaust fan with a flap, something that can close for the weather. The reason the air circulation is so important is not only for mold, but also for things like carbon dioxide and monoxide and any other things like that. You know, you can't just open a window if you're back here in the bedroom. Right, so our passive solar concept, I'll just cover very briefly since we had such a great detailed presentation of that Monday. So utilizing the passive solar concepts, we're going to retain less heat in the summertime via the south-facing windows, being at the proper angle, all those concepts. But we're also going to retain more heat in the wintertime by taking advantage of that solar energy that comes into the house. It will heat up our thermal mass and help keep the house warm, in addition to the thermal mass of the earth. So even less heating costs. So our types. We have underground and bermed. A lot of the pictures that you're going to see in my presentation are somewhat of a hybrid. Basically, underground refers to the mass majority of the house being, you know, subterranean, covered up. You'll have one main fenestration, couple of windows, things like that. Bermed is more this top picture where the house is kind of built into the side of the bank. So they're taking advantage of that thermal mass, but they're not really encompassing the whole structure into the earth. So earth shelter homes have been around for quite some time. Here's an example of a traditional underground home. This helps maintain consistent temperatures, but it's also what they had on hand. You know, a lot of places, especially in my time in the Middle East, all the places that I saw out in the rural areas, if they weren't completely subterranean for a cellar, the homes at least had 3 to 4 steps once you went through the door down to the main level, and that helped keep it warm in the wintertime, but also considerably cooler during the summer months. Here's an example of a traditional berm. You see these a lot in like the Southwest, places that aren't quite as hot as some of your desert areas, but still very arid. This allows for a lot of airflow through the house. Just taking advantage again of that thermal mass and protection from the elements by kind of building into the bank hillside. On the other spectrum, a lot of traditional Northern European homes in Scandinavia and Norway, especially in the far northern longitudes, they would build these semi-traditional houses and utilize the earth as a roof, and also for that thermal mass. This would give them very good protection from the elements, from the cold, and it's kind of an ideal climate for this because of how sporadic the weather can be. Here's a nice example of a longhouse that is earth sheltered. And so you can see our stacks here for our nice ventilation. And this would be a perfect house for a large family, or for, you know, the whole village to come into during extreme weather. So some of our modern incarnations, they utilize a lot of renewable tech. Obviously, people that are going for earth shelter homes have done some research on sustainability. So you see a lot of passive solar design, PV system utilization, water recycling, um, all sorts of systems. Um, they generally use high efficiency utilities. And a great thing about earth shelter homes is the HVAC systems. If they choose to have them, they can usually get a much smaller system than a traditional home would require for the amount of square footage, just because they don't really have the heating and cooling needs that a normal house has. All right, so our general construction of a modern uh, earth shelter house, most of the time they're built out of reinforced concrete. Some of them are poured in place. There are a lot of prefab options. The main thing that they're looking for is a structure that's strong enough to hold up to the weight of the earth, and also something that they can mitigate water around, so you don't have any leak issues. Um, Here again is just another picture. This was quite a big excavation on the right, and you can see those forms where they've poured the concrete in place. And concrete is kind of the go-to in modern applications because of its high thermal mass properties. All right, so reinforcement, I found a lot of interesting reinforcement methods. Uh, Several houses will use old tires as their kind of main embankment support. And there's a lot of different advantages of this. For one, it's recycling a material that is not recyclable otherwise, or if it is, it's a high energy recycling. But the tires actually work really well because not only their weight and the high friction of the material helps hold them in place, but because they're hollowed out, it also allows for water runoff to kind of come down through the tires. So it's kind of a two-in-one. They don't have to go back and put a waterproof membrane on the back of this. Uh, in other situations, they'll use just like a Tyvek type bag and fill it with earth, and they'll use those as reinforcements. And it's just a means of kind of keeping the fill dirt in place, keeping it from, you know, naturally sloping and degrading over time with water. So these are really cool, and it's a new movement that's come about, is the modular pods, prefabs for underground houses. They come in all different shapes and configurations. You can do, you know, a small couple hundred square feet, or there's some that are a couple thousand square feet. It's pretty limitless on what you can do with these things. I saw there was a couple of different composite materials that they used to make these. Some with recycled plastics. Um, I just found these to be really cool because of how customizable it is, and it lowers the cost because you're not having to pay an architect to get the whole house design. These things are already pre-approved and engineer stamped. So a big advantage of underground or shelter houses is the eco-friendliness of them. You you know, have the initial footprint of the excavation, but then generally the footprint of the actual structure becomes much smaller, and then you're able to rebuild that soil on the top, which adds to our, you know, carbon sequestration. You know, you're not going to have trees on top of your house, but you can have a lot of plants and just kind of maintain the natural landscape. This is a very cool house by a Northern European architect. Um, and as you can see, it's very well hidden from all sides except for the very front. They actually had to put this fence around the top of the structure to keep cows from walking in. Just another great example of how cool and modern earth shelter houses can be these days. So here's an example of a unobstructed landscape, maintaining this field and having a nice house tucked back in there. This was a very, very cool modern earth shelter house I found. It's another example of the kind of hybrid between berm and underground, although I'd say it is primarily a berm. And as you can see, they've got that grass and just the natural roughage on the roof. So it's got that good soil, it's sequestering carbon, it's helping with the water runoff by those plants absorbing the water, just all kinds of benefits. So the main advantages of an earth shelter house are the high thermal mass, which obviously is gonna, make your house super efficient, make your passive solar more efficient, just all kind of benefits. Protection from the elements, extreme heat, extreme cold. Your earth shelter house is not going to be blown over by a tornado. If you do have a fire, unfortunately, in your earth shelter house, it's not going to bring the structure down. You may lose some of your internal cosmetic work, but the structure itself is pretty much impermeable to that. And the biggest advantage is your lower energy needs. So barely anything to cool the place down in the summer due to the stack effect and the natural consistent temperatures of the earth. And in the on the other end, in the wintertime, again, using the natural consistent temperatures of the earth, you won't have to heat it as much. So disadvantages: the initial excavation costs are going to be considerably higher than building a traditional foundation house. You're not going to be digging down a couple of feet. You're going to be digging down several feet. So those costs add up a lot more. You're going to have more moisture issues that you're going to have to contend with. But again, a lot of those can be mitigated via proper construction. This is an example of technically an earth shelter house that I personally find pretty boring and bland. If you were gonna build an earth shelter house, you might as well make it semi-unique and not just look like it's a normal craftsman house, whatever you want to call it, tucked into a bank. So our overall cost, as I kind of discussed, your excavation, your waterproofing is going to be another significant initial cost, because you're going to be waterproofing the entirety of your structure or the majority of your structure, whereas a normal structure, as far as waterproofing masonry, you're just looking at like your foundation. As far as materials, most of the research that I found said that general materials beyond concrete are actually less than a traditional house. That again is dependent on how you want to construct the inside of the house. If you're fine with just having concrete walls, which can be painted or textured, that's much cheaper. But some people do choose to put up stud walls and drywall and do the whole shebang. There is a lot of back and forth on whether you should do that because of the inherent moisture problems that can happen. But that's, again, the builder's preference. And then lastly, labor, just like any other construction site. All right, so in conclusion, my assessment of earth shelter homes is that the higher costs are definitely worth it. They are very efficient, and they're Tolkien friendly.
Wow, we have a lot of shared images there. I recognize about half of what you put in yours. But
Well, I went first, so I think technically you're plagiarizing.
No, my first half of mine's a different approach. You did more of a technical presentation. Mine, first half is more historical. I think I'll pull out okay.
You'll be fine, I'm sure.
Initially, I got a couple of questions. How do they get the dirt to stay up here? Or excuse me, the soil. How do they get the soil to stay up here?
That's a very, very good question. I think on these, I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not, but the soil actually will get kind of filled in all the way around. You see those triangular shapes
Yeah.
on each side of the fenestration. So I think all of that space gets filled in.
I tell you, as much rain as we've had, I'm looking out at my yard, and my yard is ending up in my neighbor's yard. I mean, we've just got so much runoff. I've just, that was one of the first things that kind of hit me. That one is a really beautiful one. This one here. So
Yeah.
does a living roof, just so a house with a living roof, is that considered earth sheltering?
I wouldn't consider just like if it was a freestanding structure with a living roof. I wouldn't consider that an earth shelter home necessarily.
Yeah.
Sort of, it's utilizing the concept for, that thermal mass on the roof.
Right.
But I think unless it's like partially subterranean, I wouldn't consider it a full earth shelter.
Yeah.
There's a fine line between actually some of my stuff is earth sheltered. There's a fine line between actually earth sheltered and underground. So it's
Yeah.
half dozen of another.
Yeah, for sure.
This is probably something you wouldn't want to build in California, right? Where it's earthquake prone.
No.
That
was another disadvantage I wanted to mention was if you did have damage from like earthquakes, then that can be a costly repair.
Yeah, it seemed like that might be almost detrimental to the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say, I love this image. I like the whole idea. My concern here is all those trees growing across the top of it.
Yeah.
Trees can be, they can be detrimental. I mean, heck, I had a friend who had I want to say it was a maple beside of his house, and it started cracking the basement wall. So we went over and we was all helping him work on repairing that crack. So we had to, support the house and take off the back wall a little bit. I guess we should have went in there and probably dug down outside, but we went inside and started working. So when we were taking that wall down, when he pulled one particular block out of place, and the root had so much pressure against the wall that it came back and knocked him about 10 feet back on his butt.
Yeah, I could see that. They're probably eventually those trees will definitely be a problem on that. That one kind of looks like a little do-it-yourselfer project.
Yeah. One thing to note here, I like this. This is a fresh air vent for the fireplace. So that you had said that ventilation was a huge thing, and it is. Probably the two biggest things there, or three, I guess three. The biggest things is proper support, ventilation, and then water. I mean, because you really gotta big time pay attention to getting all of these places sealed up.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think these are?
Yeah, I was looking at that. I feel like I don't know if they're storage or if they're just some kind of ventilation chute of sorts. I wasn't really sure.
I didn't see any images like that when I was searching. That looks like it might be ventilation though.
Or maybe even like a water catchment.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it's kind of a passive solar thing where you have like underground water that helps with thermal mass a little bit more. You bring the water up front, grab the solar, takes it back down, and keeps it warm storage underneath. I don't know. I thought that was interesting when I seen that.
Yeah.
It does look more like air ventilation to me, with the same sort of passive ventilation systems we were looking at before.
Danny, can you turn your microphone up a little bit, or I heard about half of that.
Sorry if I was quiet there. It does seem more like air ventilation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm.
On that, yeah. And considering you'd want more ventilation for the earth berming.
Right. I kind of agree with you there. That's kind of bland. Almost looks like just, you know, a traditional house stuck back in the ground. I'm like you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah. I had to put that one in there because it was so bad.
When I was in architecture school, I designed a house similar to this. It didn't have these wraparound things here, but it was basically a house on a ski slope. And so we were given, you know, detrimental problems. The assignment was, you know, one person had to design a house, an earthquake prone area. Another person had to design a house in a tornado area. Mine was avalanche. And so you know, I dug it back into the ground here, pretty much, you know, this way. But like I say, it didn't have these curves on it. These mine kind of just came out straight. And you know, a couple of things that we had to do. We had the main entrance here, but we had emergency entrances up above. So it was actually a tower that went way up above. So if they had avalanches, that had other means of getting out and so forth.
I'd hate to have to snow shovel out that patio right there.
Yeah,
4 or 5 feet of snow. That'd be a rough
Yeah.
way to get out in the morning.
absolutely.
Any idea where that one's at, Mark?
It's been, you know, like a week and a half since I looked at it. I think it was in Northern Europe, I believe.
Okay.
There is one house, or the remnants of a house in Northern Europe that ranked way up, you know, as being close to one of the oldest structures. And it was like way the heck up here somewhere. I mean, it's like super cold, and it was mostly underground. I don't remember which town it was, but somewhere up here there was remnants of one of the oldest shelters that, you know, still had remnants of it. And it was underground. And so they had used the stones around there and what wood and covered it up, and then somehow got this earth to stay up there. And I thought that was really cool because, you know, they dated it like, you know, 9,000-10,000 years. So it was pretty cool on that.
But the root systems from just like the grass and stuff.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Yeah, right.
Give it structure.
When you say just now, when you said root system, it made me think that, you know, going back to this other picture here, if you had a root system up here, but you were able to maintain these trees, had some sort of plant that would not, you know, they wouldn't get much bigger than this, then that root system could also help hold that dirt. And what makes me think is those pictures of Indiana Jones, where they going into that, what is it, Mayan? Let's see if I, Mayan temple. You know, when you get down there and you see all those roots that are growing up all over it. And of course, I'm never going to find a good picture of what I'm wanting to show you, but you know what I'm talking about, those the root systems that pretty much just take over these old temples.
Oh yeah.
You're thinking more like Angkor Wat.
What is it?
Cambodia, Angkor Wat, ANG. Yeah, just Cambodia temple will probably get you there.
Yeah.
There you go.
Mhm.
Look at those old roots.
And it's amazing that these things grow, and well, I guess it's because they're all made of stone, but they don't. It's still there,
Mhm.
So that's pretty cool. Any more questions for Mark? Thank you, Mark.
Well, I don't know, Mark, just throwing in, did you see anything else on as far as dealing with exterior bulk water? We looked at several products like our drainage mats, things like that. Did you see any other examples of ways to deal with bulk groundwater?
Not bulk. It was a lot of traditional systems, drainage mats, and but on a larger scale, like the whole thing drainage mat. But a lot of the houses I looked at did catchment systems
Right.
to help alleviate that.
That's what I've seen really is just kind of a larger versions of the drainage maintenance systems that we have on traditional foundations. But I have seen some pretty over-engineered systems for that, but I feel like it's always going to be worthwhile to spend the money on the upfront
Yeah.
than deal with
There was one house in your presentation that I watched a whole video about that had the angled windows, and that was an earth shelter house, and he recycled all of his water, and it fed that whole little front greenhouse area. It was all recycled.
Yeah, with this amount of concrete underground, you really have to take a lot of major steps to reduce the hydrostatic pressure on the walls and deal with the fact that it's going to see a lot of moisture.
Yeah.
I had one friend who had a earth bermed house, and their garden was on top, and they watered the garden all the time. So it's like you're just pouring water on your house constantly.
I found that, when you got gardens on places like that, it's like that whole structure will suck the water out of it. I mean, you got a garden on top of a house where you may not have, maybe 2 feet of dirt or something, even less, but man, that water just goes. And so you're having to water it twice as much.
Mm-hmm. Unless you do a gray water irrigation system.
Mm-hmm. Any last comments or questions for Mark? Okay, Sam, you are up. Let's see. Take it away from Mark and give it to you.
Okay. Do you guys see the just the PowerPoint, or do you see the presenter view?
No, we see it all.
You got
Presenter view.
Oh, okay. Okay, what about now?
Regular view.
Yeah, that's good.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Sam, and I'm going to teach you guys a little bit about Earthship homes today. Okay, so a little bit of history. This building method was invented by an architect named Michael Reynolds in the 70s. He graduated from architecture school in 1969 and was really inspired by the issue of global waste and the debate over what to do with it. And keep in mind, at this time, recycling programs didn't exist. So he was just, kind of a trailblazer on that front of trying to figure out what to do with waste. So this leads to him kind of trying to think of ways to use garbage to build structures. And thus the beer can brick was created. And here's a little picture of the beer can brick in action up top here. And then a couple pictures of Michael Reynolds. The one on the left is him in the 70s, and then the one on the right is him a little bit closer to today. He ended up buying some land in Taos, New Mexico with some of his friends, and they just kind of began to experiment with various building methods and eventually became recognized for their homes made of garbage. And then over time, their building methods have evolved quite a bit. And then eventually he started a company called Earthship Biotexture. In the early days, Earthships were really, really simple. They had three main principles. The homes would utilize recycled materials, garbage, and local materials whenever possible. The Earthships would generate their own needs independent from the grid, and it would be feasible for anyone without specialized construction knowledge to build for themselves. And that's really the biggest point there, is that they wanted this to be something that could be accomplished by really anybody without having to use heavy machinery and really just your own two hands and some garbage that you've collected. So here are some of the early experimental designs. On the top right here, you can see a diagram of the beer can brick. That was kind of built with a couple of cans that were still intact and a couple of cans that had been smashed, and they were all wired together. And then just kind of like placed on top of each other with some mortar in between or some adobe mud or something like that. And then over here on the left is one of their earliest kind of like dwelling structures. A lot of them in the early days had this dome top, and they were all mostly made out of cans that were parallel to the ground, so horizontal. Yeah. There's a smokestack for ventilation for a hearth or a fireplace, along with recycled doors and windows on there. But they're all, at that time, were built really, really simply without very many amenities whatsoever. And here's some more early photos. All the way on the right, you can kind of see, this is, I think, one of the first designs where they started using glass bottles. And you can see that they're kind of like the necks of the bottles are sticking out a little bit. And this is kind of before they had refined that structure a little more. And then the presence of the child in the photo just kind of shows how the land that they bought out in New Mexico became somewhat of like a communal living space. So there were a lot of families out there that were building their own homes for themselves. And I guess the whole point was to be a community of self-sufficient people, kind of free from the typical constraints of, American life. On the bottom left here is an example of how they started using aluminum cans separated from the beer can bricks. They pretty early on abandoned the beer can brick, kind of noticing that if they were to just use cans and mortar by themselves, they got a little more freedom with structures that they're able to build, and you can get a little more artistic with it too. And the photo in the middle is a good example of how they start to get a little more creative over time with how they're using cans and bottles and such to create, aesthetically pleasing structures. And then on the top left over there is an early floor plan design in which kind of some of the dome dwellings are connected to a larger communal living space. And you can kind of see they've got this area right here in the front where they're trying to grow a garden and everything. So they're starting to use passive solar design. And then there are some tubes coming off the bottom, or coming off the back, I should say, of these dwellings to kind of give a little bit of ventilation. So on the top left is another dome style home that was built by Reynolds and his crew. This particular photo kind of shows how the construction mainly takes place with just manual labor. And they've kind of built this scaffolding for themselves to get up on the top. And it's mostly just offset by buckets of mortar and logs and stuff like that to get up there to finish the dome. On the bottom, you can see where the buildings start to get a little more sophisticated. Specifically on the bottom right, they start to include some framing along with beer cans and mortar and adobe mud and all that. Just, giving more freedom of motion and everything. And then the two photos on the bottom left and the top right show the first two homes that were built to incorporate all of the knowledge that they had learned over time, just building these structures and experimenting with different things. So these are the first two houses that include passive solar, water catchment. They hand built, you can see up on the top here, right by the rainbow, and then on the top of this bottom left house down here, they've built their own wind turbines to generate electricity. So yeah, they talk a lot about freedom and how Earthships are meant to free the individuals that live in them kind of from having to, you know, pay utility bills and stuff like that. And there is a documentary about Michael Reynolds and his Earthship building method. It's called Garbage Warrior. He speaks briefly about how when you wake up in the morning and you don't have any utility bills to pay for your home, that kind of provides you with all of your own needs. Your day is free to do whatever it is that you want, kind of to enrich your life. And they also speak to another architect in this movie that lives on the property with his young family. And he talks about how his children know that their home takes care of them, like they take care of it. And it gives them drinking water, it gives them their heat, all of that. And she doesn't know any other way for a house to be. And I kind of thought that was cool. So over time, the building methods evolve quite a bit. They learn a lot, they adjust and kind of adapt all of their building methods to be able to use what works and kind of get rid of the ideas that didn't work. So an example of this is a 2-story Earthship that they tried to build with angled passive solar windows on both stories. And this ended up being way too much solar gain. The house was incredibly hot all of the time and way, way, way overly hot in the summertime. So they kind of ditched that idea and stayed more to 1-story houses after that. And the list of principles kind of evolves to include thermal and solar heating and cooling methods, passive solar gains, thermal mass, solar and wind electricity generation, water harvesting and repurposing, contained sewage treatment for each of the homes, and then food production within each Earthship as well. And we'll get into a little more specifics about all of this in a moment. So basic Earthship construction. In more modern Earthships, the beer can bricks and the aluminum can building methods have pretty much been abandoned in favor for methods that provide more insulation, more strength, and more ventilation. So this brings us to the use of rammed earth tire walls, which are typically built in U shapes, as you can see up here in this top photo, because it's kind of hard to get a right angle corner with a bunch of tires. So they kind of learned that tires are one of the most commonly discarded items and are typically dumped into like tire pits, and those pose a lot of health risks to the environment and people that live near them. So they come up with the rammed earth tire system. So basically what you do is you dig out an area by a hill so you can get your earth berm over the back, and you lay out recycled tires in the footprint of what you want your home to look like. And you fill these tires with dirt that comes from the back, you know, all of your recycled dirt that you've dug out for your home. And you pound it into the tires with sledgehammers. And most of the construction of these homes takes place with sledgehammers. You do a lot of the digging yourself with the sledgehammer, et cetera. So because these tires can become so heavy, about 300 pounds a piece, you typically are ramming the earth in place. So you'll do one course of tires, you'll fill in the dirt behind the tire wall, and then you'll lay another course of tires over top and start to ram the earth in those, and so on and so on. There's typically not any heavy machinery around when building, so that's another reason that the tires are rammed in place. They're near impossible to move just with a couple of people. And the south-facing greenhouse walls are also outfitted with skylights and hatch windows to allow for opening and closing based on the indoor temperature needs to allow for ventilation. Most of the south-facing windows also have shades that you can pull down if it's getting a little too hot in there. Most Earthships have photovoltaic systems and wind electricity systems that are placed on the roof or on the earth berm behind the home, and they're typically connected to battery storage inside the home for electricity use. Rainwater is collected in cisterns to be circulated throughout the home. Earthships use water 4 times. So after the water is collected, it's moved through a filter, and then it comes out as clean water into your sinks, your washing machine if you have one, through your shower heads. And then the gray water from all of that is filtered again and sent through grease traps if it's coming from the kitchen. And then that's circulated through the greenhouse soil. And then the runoff from the greenhouse soil in your home is then filtered again and sent to fill toilets, things like that. And then your black water is sent through a contained sewage treatment, which is mostly like bacteria based. And then that is dispersed outside of your home into either just the ground if you don't have any vegetation out there, but you can also have yourself a nice garden outside. They don't recommend that you feed like plants that you're going to eat with your sewage, but if you just have like some trees and shrubs and stuff outside, that'll be fine to use. So rammed earth tire walls are strong enough to be load bearing, and they don't require the construction of a traditional foundation, which is a huge advantage to building with tires. So the top left photo here kind of shows how the earth is filled in behind the courses of tires as you go. And then the top right photo is a good example of the earth wall tires being rammed by hand with sledgehammers. And you can see there's a lot of people in that photo. Usually construction of these takes a lot of folks that are willing to help you out. The bottom left photo is a nice diagram showing how the Earthship is built into the hillside, and then typically wood decking is placed on top of the tire walls to be able to get your berm going over the top of the roof. And then the bottom right photo shows how the rammed earth tire wall in the back here, you can kind of stick frame on top of it to get your angled windows in here on the front for your greenhouse, etc. So on the left, you can kind of see how some Earthships are also equipped with runoff water collection systems independent from the water collection cisterns that you're going to be using inside your home. They usually have a lot of really creative ways to divert water to mitigate any, moisture issues. Typically, your water cisterns are also going to be buried inside the berm, and that'll also help with keeping thermal mass back there. On the top right here, here's another quick diagram of the water flow through an Earthship. So you can see it's cached on the roof up here. It goes through the cistern. There's a water organizing module that'll send it to bathing, showering, washing dishes. Then that'll be sent through your interior botanical cell, then sent through your flush toilet, and then sent through your exterior botanical cells. And then the bottom right here is a picture of some of the water pumps inside the Earthship that are required for pumping from the collection cistern throughout the home. And here are some good examples of the greenhouse space that are built into Earthships. Typically, those are on the south-facing windows, and they're kind of built parallel to, the rest of the home. The more successful temperature regulating Earthships that have this greenhouse built parallel to the rest of the living quarters, and they're kind of separated from the rest of the living quarters by a second adobe mud wall and also a second set of glazing. So because it gets so hot in here, it can get, I think, up to 10 degrees warmer in the greenhouse than it can in the rest of the home. You're going to want to have another barrier between the greenhouse space and your living space, so it's not getting overly hot. And you can also see some hatches up here and some rope pulls that can be used to open up the skylights to allow for some more ventilation through the space. And one of the best insulators is still air, so this makes use of that to be able to heat the rest of your home in the summer or in the wintertime. And then the earthen walls on the inside also store thermal mass to radiate to the rest of the home. And here is a nice example of just kind of like a diagram of a modern Earthship. So this is another good thing to show the ongoing convection current that is flowing throughout a properly performing Earthship, because they have these earth tubes that go through the bermed wall behind out into the open air behind the home. So warm air is drawn into the home through these earth tubes, and they typically have hatches on the inside so you can open or close them based on your needs. So when the warm air moves through the earth berm behind your home, it's cooled by the thermal mass temperature within the earth, and then it's dispersed through your home. And as the air is warmed, it kind of rises, goes through these hatches that are right here between like your second set of glazing and your second earthen wall moves through the greenhouse and then up through the hatches up on top of the greenhouse to let warm air out. You can see your water cistern right here that's buried within the earth berm. You can see your tire wall here that's also helping to hold thermal mass. And then your summer sun coming down onto the angled glazing of the greenhouse area. Yeah, this earth tube concept is really, really awesome. It helps keep the inside temperature of the Earthship at a constant. I think they keep it at like 68 to 72 degrees or something like that, which is super cool. Okay, so here's some legal issues that Mike Reynolds and his team have run into. So as I was saying earlier, the Earthship kind of commune was really just a group of people who are building themselves homes out of whatever they could find on the land that they owned or purchased building rights from. Some people were able to secure plots of land from Mike Reynolds for less than $3,000 and build their homes, you know, just out of recycled materials and manual labor, costing them almost nothing. A lot of people had originally just come to the land and pitched tents and made themselves little campsites and were kind of building their Earthship homes around their tents. So their structure is kind of, you know, evolving as they go and providing them with more shelter as they go. So previously, Taos County had kind of been working amicably with Mike Reynolds and his team and the group that lived there. Somebody in the permits office was really kind of sympathetic to their cause and everything and was really helping them out with obtaining permits. I think they kind of almost had a little bit of a don't ask, don't tell policy going on for a while too. But eventually the head of the building permits office in Taos, I think he either passed away or retired. And there was a kind of resulting power shift in the building that kind of came down hard on Reynolds and his team and the people that lived on the property. So as the power in the permits office shifts, visits are made to the property by the county and stop work orders are issued for all construction that they have going on the land. Mike Reynolds is kind of evaluated by the county as if he had built numerous illegal subdivisions as a major land developer. Instead of just kind of selling plots of land to people and letting them haul whatever they want there and building their own homes. And kind of just to reiterate, most of these people are living in tents and just trying to build themselves permanent shelter. So most of them continued on with their work despite stop work orders being issued. And all of this results in Mike Reynolds losing his accreditations and his architect's license. And here is a quick quote that I'd like to share from him. In a state that has designated several thousand acres for testing weapons of destruction to humanity, can't we allow 650 acres to be allowed for testing methods of human survival? I'll go to jail for that. I'll die for that. And here are some photos of pretty much bomb testing sites in New Mexico. So following all of this, losing his architect's license and everything, he kind of stops building for a while and focuses all of his energy on getting, trying to at least get a bill passed in New Mexico to sanction his land as a sustainable development testing site. So his bill, you know, he spends a while working on this. Eventually it gets filibustered by the New Mexico state government. He does his best to continue on with his plans, but kind of play by the permit office's rules. So this forces his really, really, really out of the box ideas and solutions into kind of like a more neatly packaged, like socially acceptable and legal way of building homes. So I think this is where a lot of critiques of the Earthship Biotexture Company and the Earthship building method comes from. He, you know, goes on to kind of try to build a few subdivisions that kind of have like a standardized blueprint and floor plan. So a couple of houses are built the same way. And this ultimately it kind of fails because this is not really a cookie cutter kind of building method. It requires very site specific considerations. And it kind of drew in a lot of people that maybe weren't well fit for this kind of style of living, I guess. Most of this is still really experimental, you know, they're kind of working as they go and, you know, they find stuff out and they change the way they're building and all that. But, you know, so not everything in these Earthships that he built for the general public kind of end up working the way that they should or the way that people that lived in them thought they should. So here, costs from Earthship Biotexture. If you want to build an Earthship and have his company build it for you, you're going to pay about $225 per square foot. For reference, the average home in the United States costs between 100 and 150 excuse me, $100 to $150 per square foot. So you can see, you're going to pay quite a bit more. And then to have maintenance done by the company itself is expensive. You can't really just call out like a traditional plumber to this house. So you're typically, if something's going wrong, you're going to have to call the company itself. And they charge $150 per half hour to have someone evaluate your home. So that can rack up really quick too. And here are a couple of photos of some Earthship Biotexture houses today. You can see they've become a little more grand. And here's a couple more. They've kind of moved to almost like an artistic building method. They're using different colors of adobe mud and stuff like that. And here's a good little diagram of what an Earthship home kind of will look like today. And you can see the wind turbines, geothermal vents right here, water storage. You've got your piping out here to get your water recycled, all of that. So if you want to build an Earthship on your own, you may not spend a whole lot of money up front building, but the work is going to be really, really, really difficult. Building one yourself usually requires a team of volunteers that want to be a part of the process. It's going to take some time also, perhaps up to a few years, depending on how much time you're able to devote to it. If you're still keeping a full-time job and you're just working on your house when you get home at night and then on the weekends, it's probably going to take you a couple years. And then there's also the considerations for materials. If you want to do this yourself, you're going to have to collect and transport all of your materials yourself. And you're also going to have some sort of land where you're able to do this. So here is almost like a little case study of a couple that built their own Earthship by themselves. They were able to get their home constructed for under $10,000, and that includes the cost of the land and everything that they built on. They spent some time learning the principles and methods behind Earthships and then kind of built their own home based on that. They were able to complete it in under a year, and all of their windows, doors, and furniture were either found, acquired for free, or handmade by them themselves. And here are a few more pictures of their home. You can see this one is kind of goes back to like the original principles of the Earthship, which is just kind of living with less and making do, with what you have. Their home is I think it's maybe around 500 square feet. It's kind of like a little studio style home. You can see they've got their bedroom right here. There's like a small kitchenette over here. And then they've got a small little living space. And here's a good photo of some of their found windows. They've got this nice octagon window right here. So some of the advantages of the Earthships, these can be built really, really cheaply if you want to do it yourself. Most of them can operate entirely off of the grid, and they can provide a use for materials that would otherwise be thrown away. Especially useful in developing worlds or areas that have experienced a natural disaster. The Earthship Biotexture Company has actually done a couple of disaster relief projects. And these photos here are from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, following an earthquake in the early 2000s. Reynolds and his crew traveled out there to teach their building methods to the locals that were in need of shelter following the destruction of their city. And a lot of the rubble from the earthquake was reused as mortar mix to be able to build structures for these people to live in. And then these photos here are from the Andaman Islands that are off the coast of India following a tsunami that killed 3/4 of the people that lived there and destroyed their towns. A large issue that the islanders faced in rebuilding was that the wave had washed out all of their wells and filled them with salt water, rendering them useless. So Reynolds and his crew worked with local engineers to create different rainwater collection methods in these shelters for them. And they ended up being able to get these structures up very quickly because the entire community was involved in their building. They taught they taught the adults how to earth ram tires and kind of had the adults working on that, and then sent off all the children from the village to collect plastic bottles and glass bottles and all that and bring them back, scraps of wood, all that. So they were able to get some structures up really quickly for a lot of people that really needed a place to live at the time. A couple of disadvantages. These can be really expensive if they're built by the Earthship Biotecture Company themselves. And like I said earlier, they're a very experimental building method. So, you know, a lot of the kinks still aren't worked out completely. So you kind of have to be okay with, you know, maybe not getting exactly what you're paying for. And they can take up to 2 to 3 years to find their internal temperature and self-regulate as intended. It's really, really difficult to get permits for this, if not impossible. Very difficult to insure. I think I read that there's only one company that will insure an Earthship home, and they're located in Taos, New Mexico. And these aren't suitable for all environments. When you look at the map of where Earthships are located, you don't really see any at all in the southeastern United States where we are, mostly for moisture issues. A lot of these are built in more hot and arid climates like Taos, New Mexico. Though, you know, some tropical places like Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and the Andaman Islands in India have been able to make it work there too. And it can take, you know, a couple years to build on your own if you're wanting to do this yourself. And here's another possible disadvantage. It's really kind of, you know, the jury's a little bit out on this one. It's mostly unknown as to whether or not tires leach toxic chemicals into the soil surrounding them, or more specifically, into your Earthship home. Even the EPA kind of admits that science really isn't all there, and they can't make a definitive statement as to whether or not tires in a home or tires used to build a home are going to off-gas into your home. Though it is believed that the rammed earth tires that are buried underground are a lot less likely to degrade because they won't be exposed to UV radiation from the sun. Because of this, some countries like Belgium, they prohibit the use of repurposed tires in construction for this reason. So Earthship Belgium uses earth bags instead, which are, you know, just bags filled with earth. Kind of the same thing. They're also strong enough to be load bearing and also don't require the building of a foundation. Earthship Biotecture claims that their homes don't experience off-gassing, but they don't really have a whole lot of science to back that claim up. And here are a few more photos of earth bag Earthships in the process of being built. So I would probably not pay to have an Earthship built for me by Earthship Biotecture. And in these two photos, you can see that the company has kind of moved a little bit more towards luxury in the modern day. You know, that's a full-size gas range right here. That's a huge refrigerator and a nice sink right there. Nice bathtub over here on the right. I don't really imagine that that was recycled. These new homes just kind of show that luxury is built into some of the Earthships. And they've kind of become like a novelty almost for people that have a lot of money to be able to move into. But I would build one myself, borrowing from a lot of different Earthship principles and practices. This photo on the left here is a Earthship that was built, I believe, in Victoria, Australia, by a couple who spent some time in the United States with the Earthship Biotecture Company, kind of learning their principles and their practices, and just the basics of an Earthship, and then took all of that knowledge home and built their own. Here are some of my sources. And that's about it. Does anybody have questions?
Do you have any idea what the countertop around that sink in the last photo was made of?
Hold on.
Yeah, right there.
It looks, the outside I know is definitely tile.
Right.
I don't know.
I like that. It looks pretty interesting.
Yeah, it might be concrete. I know concrete countertops are popular these days.
I do like that kitchen.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Say what you said again, Sam. You broke up there when you were trying to talk about that countertop.
It looks like it might be concrete. I was just saying that I know concrete countertops are kind of in these days.
Couple of questions from me. I don't know where that picture is.
Since I've turned this in.
What's that?
I said I've added some pictures since I turned this in.
You have?
Yeah.
Oh. There was one picture, yeah. Would it not be advantageous to turn all of these downward so that they don't hold water?
I would think so, yes.
And you said they done away with the can idea or the brick idea.
Yeah, the beer can brick kind of came and then went. I think they realized that they could have more freedom with shapes of structures if they kind of abandoned that idea. And then eventually they moved past the cans entirely and just opted more for glass bottles because they end up being prettier and they can catch some sunlight.
Yeah. So that the beer can brick, did they fill that with earth? Or was they empty?
From what I could find, they were mostly empty, though I think it would probably be a lot better if they were filled with earth.
Yeah, it seems like they'd give you more mass. As you were going through this, I just so happened to look down here and I seen these gloves, and at first I thought, man, they buried somebody in there. So they are creating their own septic system. Yeah, this is what I was. So this said botanical cells and solar septic system. Tell me about a solar septic system.
I think the purpose there is they use a lot of bacteria within the cell. I'm not totally sure where the solar comes into it with the septic system. But yeah, a lot of it's relying on like natural bacterias, filters, grease traps, stuff like that.
Okay. I got to correct you on one photo. You talked about being a pump. Unfortunately, it was not a pump. It was it's a tankless water heater.
Oh.
Yeah, I recognize that. I use that in my environmental systems project with Carla.
I don't see it now. You may have added that to it.
Yeah, I was trying to find pictures of those. There's not, they kind of try to stay out of the public eye with a lot of the like inner workings of it, I think, these days.
Mm-hmm.
So there's pictures of like the artistic, attributes of the house, but you can't find a whole lot of pictures of how everything works.
So in my endeavor throughout my architecture studies and green building studies, one of the biggest, it is probably the number one rule is no petroleum in the house. Mm-hmm. And tires are made of petroleum. Anything that has petroleum in it is going to off gas. And I know, like you say, there have been some legal aspects, fights on that. But in any architecture school, they will tell you, to get low VOC, do not put petroleum products inside the house, period.
Yeah, I think, when they first started building with tires was in the 70s. So I'm not sure that there was a whole lot of specific science and regulation about that at that time. And I think that they made it such an integral part of the Earthship building method that they're really, really unwilling to let go of it.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of claims that they make about how there's absolutely no off-gassing in an Earthship home. However, they don't have any science to back it up.
He won the election. He didn't have any, any claim to it, but he won the election.
Yeah.
So these look like they are like super laborious to build. I
They
mean,
are.
ramming these tires, holy mackerel. I've seen in the past some videos of people, so they're working in the southwest where it's hot, it's kind of an arid desert-like area, and they are ramming these things. And I'm thinking, good Lord. I mean, I've busted wood in the summertime, and it ain't fun for sure. Did you come across anything when you was talking about legal issues?
Mhm.
Did you come across anything where Michael Reynolds was suing for the name Earthship? In the past, I've had students mention something about a trademark infringement where he has the trademark Earthship. Did you come across anything like that?
No, I was focusing mainly on the legal issues that he was having around building his Earthships. But I do know that the Earthship Biotexture Company doesn't particularly like it when other people build Earthships and call them Earthships. They want it to kind of just be something that they, have, like you said, have a trademark on.
Yeah. So the issues with the building inspection office, did you find out any specific issues? I mean, obviously structure, but what about health issue? Well, you addressed the tires. What about sewage issues? I guess was that one of the concerns?
Yeah, sewage was a concern. They were also really concerned with no utility lines going there whatsoever. They were also concerned with roads. They didn't have any established roads. So yeah, a lot of people that moved out to those Earthship kind of subdivisions that they built after they were having all of those issues complained about not having roads to go to their house. Their water system didn't work exactly correctly. They had all of these complaints, but a lot of it was, I felt kind of unwarranted because you made the choice, you knew what you were getting into, and you made the choice to move out there and buy this home and everything. And well, you knew that there weren't roads and you knew that there weren't any utility lines.
So you're saying that people had moved out there to build these Earthships, were some of the people complaining?
No. So most of the people that moved out there kind of in this like communal sense moved out there to build their own homes. They wanted to be a part of the process. They really were excited by what Mike Reynolds was doing. They wanted to be self-sufficient and they wanted to be sustainable. So they moved out there and were living on the property and building their own homes. Now, fast forward a little bit to where he's having the issues with the permits office. After that, after losing his architecture license and things like that, he kind of tries to continue building Earthships, but within the parameters that the building office has given him. So that's when the small subdivisions start to come together. And that's when, the Earthship Biotexture Company starts selling Earthship homes that are already made that you can move into. So some of the people that were excited by this idea moved out to these homes and really, knew what they were getting into. They're pretty adamant about how everything is still really experimental, and they say that a lot. So a lot of the people that moved out there were complaining about not having any roads and how they had to replace a bunch of tires and car parts and stuff on their cars because there weren't any roads to get out there. How they were having moisture issues, stuff like that. So who didn't after the fact, I think weren't really like just down with the whole communal aspect of it.
I know, you know, the tire issue, you know, that's something that everybody has really, I'm gonna blow this up just a minute so you can. I like the idea of using the tires because tires take up just tons of acreage in landfills, really. And so, and what, we change them out every what, 3 to 5 years, depending on how far we drive or how often. I mean, you know, tires only last about what, 30 to 50,000 miles, somewhere in that neighborhood. And you got to have 4 of them on your car. And then when you look out there and you think about how many cars are going up and down the highway, it can, you know, where are all these tires going? So it's pretty crazy. Did he get his site to be a, you said he was trying to, but I'm assuming he still hasn't got it classified as a
No,
environmental, what was it? I forgot the
we wanted to have it sanctioned as a sustainable development testing site.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, so he had that bill put together. He spent, you know, a couple years time working on that instead of working on Earthships. And then eventually the bill, he was hitting a lot of roadblocks getting it introduced, and then finally found somebody that was willing to help him introduce the bill. And then the bill was filibustered by state government.
Anybody got any questions for Sam? Any statements?
I was just wondering, Eric, I mean, I studied this a lot in the 80s when I was in school for architecture, so I'm familiar with a lot of it. I didn't keep up with it, but I'm just wondering with the tires and the off-gassing, isn't there a way to seal that off or have a vapor barrier to carry any possible off-gassing back outside if you design it correctly?
Oh, I'm sure of it. Yeah, I mean, you know, you can put barriers up there for sure.
Isn't there a slice diagram you can show? I was looking at that. One that shows like a cross section, you know, like a sketch, not a real photograph.
Was there one in her presentation? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I thought there was a cross section at one point in the beginning. She had some, I thought there was.
Well, that may be.
I might be thinking of the Earthship.
Yeah, there's a couple diagrams of like actual Earthships in there. I don't know about cross sections of tire walls. I'm sure you could design it to kind of route the off-gassing elsewhere. That kind of gets into equipment and materials that aren't exactly recycled, though.
Well, if you try, oh, that's it there. Yeah, that's the one she had in there, that I think. Yeah, I remember. I thought there was one.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Now, does that show the tires? Oh, yeah, it does.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so the tires are really on the ends. Okay, that's not good then.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have to shield that and ventilate it back out or up.
Yeah, typically the tires are covered with like adobe mud or mortar or cement or something like that. And then if you want to get creative with it, you can paint it with non-latex paint or just cover it with adobe that's with natural dyes or whatever. But they're pretty close to the inside of your home.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, I think that looks like the one. No, that's more structural, but yeah. Yeah, you'd have to get, I mean, by the time you spend the money to pay an engineer to design all that, you've raised the cost to defeat the purpose of doing it in the first place, I guess.
Well, at $225 a square foot, you know, but then I really like this, you know, the story that you had in there about the couple that built theirs for about $10,000. You You must have changed a lot of these because I can't find nothing. There it is right there.
Some pictures. I realized that I didn't have enough like visual aid of how the Earthship was built exactly.
Yeah.
I could talk about for a while, but I wanted to have more times on there.
So, using recycled materials is a big thing in my book. Like I say, I've built a tiny house for almost nothing using pallets and recycled wood and stuff. I want to point you in this direction. If you got a moment, take a look at this particular video here. This was a competition that was established by Google many moons ago, and I was a part of when I was at Western Piedmont, where we built we talked about the concept of using the plastic bottle as part of an insulator in a wall. So we built a wall and filled it full of plastic bottles that were sealed, that had a cap on it, and then used spray foam around them and created a wall that had about an R42 in it. So it would, just using plastic bottles and stuff. So take a look at that. It's pretty cool. But the bottle method has been around for years. Just stick it in the wall and make it look real pretty. The rammed earth shelter, or the rammed earth homes, they also use different colored bottles and so forth. So it's really cool.
One word of advice: if you use a lot of bottles, if you put the necks facing out and you're in a windy area, that building's going to make a lot of weird noise.
It's going to sing, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yeah, so that one of the very first pictures on there where they had the necks of the bottles sticking out when they first started to use those, I think they quickly realized that. And in a lot of the videos that I was watching later on, next slide. Yep, right there. I think they started to realize that that was an issue and started cutting the bottles in half and then kind of sticking them together. So you had two ends instead of, an end and a neck.
It also just becomes homes for bugs.
Yeah.
Whether they're inside or out. If you've got openings in the wall, that's where bugs want to be.
Bird houses, bees, all kinds of things. Yeah. That's what I was thinking when I was looking at these cans here. It's just, I don't know why that they would put the opening out.
Well, I think they
Aluminum cans don't have any structure. Wouldn't they have to fill it with something?
Well, I thought about that too, but I don't know.
They would crush.
Well, there weren't very many can structures after like the early 70s. So I assume they learned their lesson there pretty quickly.
Yeah, that R value right there just has to be minimal.
One thing I know.
Possible. Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention cans back then might have also used more aluminum than they do today, which might have made them sturdier. I don't know.
Well, you mean steel? That's what I was getting ready to say. So for you youngsters out there, this is what I used to drink out of. This was an all steel can. They had this huge rim across it. And when you opened it, you had a tab that actually pulled off and you discarded. It was not part of the can. And you could take these cans and put them in a can opener and cut the tops and the bottoms out of them. We would tape those boogers together and make potato cannons out of it. If you try to do that with an aluminum can today, the can would probably explode.
Yeah, I don't think you could squash the old beer cans like you do the cheap aluminums today.
No, we used to take cans to the recycler. It was kind of like you collected bottles, you collected cans, and couldn't step on these. Well, we couldn't. We were young. We couldn't step on these and crush them And that was one of the ways that we tested to see if they were steel or aluminum, because the aluminums we could step on and crush them, but the steel ones we had to hit it with a hammer, with a sledgehammer to crush them.
I still pull those old steel cans out of the river fully intact, but the aluminum cans end up crushed down into balls.
Yeah, yeah. If you come across any Coca-Cola cans that's not so rusty, you can't tell what they are, keep me in mind.
I mostly get Coors and Schlitz and yeah.
The beer drinkers, they didn't care. Here, throw it out there.
I got a lot of Coke bottles, but no Coke cans.
Yeah, yeah. The Coke cans, that's what I do collecting, and the cans, they didn't survive a lot.
I got barrels of pool tabs though, so if you pool tabs.
Yeah. They used to make belts out of those things, and keychains and all kinds of things.
It just amazes me that we quit using them decades ago, and I still pull a few out of the river every week.
Do you do it with a magnet or what?
No, they just wash up.
Oh, okay. Okay. Cool. All right. Any last questions for Sam?
That was a great presentation.
Yep, she did a good job. Very good job. All right, Mr. Stark, put on your Iron Man suit and tell us about
I didn't even
what you have.
Tony Stark.
I had photovoltaics. Let's see. Choose what you'd like to share. Okay. All right. Can everybody see that okay?
Mm-hmm. You want to enlarge it, make it big?
Yeah. There we go. All right. Let me just find my. There we go. Perfect. All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Ben Stark. And today I'll be talking to you about the photovoltaics and the photovoltaic effect. The photovoltaic effect is the phenomenon that makes photovoltaics possible. So a quick rundown of what the photovoltaic effect is. Basically, you've got two semiconductors. One has an excess of electrons and one has spaces for those electrons to go. Sunlight hits these semiconductors and excites the electrons, and it creates an electric field that we can harness to generate electricity. Quick history of the photovoltaic effect. This guy here is Edmund Becquerel. In 1839, at age 19, he was credited with discovering the photovoltaic effect. This is a little example of this experiment. The experiment consisted of platinum electrodes, which you can see here. They were coated in silver bromide and suspended in an acidic solution. Exposing these electrodes to sunlight resulted in a current being generated. And then flash forward about 114 years, 1953, Bell Laboratories unveiled the first commercially practical solar cell. This was a silicone solar cell, so they moved from wet to solid cells. It had an efficiency of about 6%, which was comparable to gas engines at the time, although obviously it couldn't generate as much power. And these are the three gentlemen that are credited with developing that silicone cell. And today, solar is found all over the globe. It's the fastest growing form of renewable energy. Let's see. Looks like, okay, sorry about that. This is a solar panel, a solar park in the Middle East. And then this one here is the first floating solar park in China. And the water, not only does this use space that otherwise wouldn't be used, but the water also helps to keep the panels at a cooler temperature, making them more efficient. So this is a map that shows where most of the solar power is being generated worldwide. You can see that China, India, Germany, and the United States are the leaders, up in the range of over 80 terawatt hours. This is a little rundown of the kind of the insides of a typical solar panel. On the left here, we have a typical solar cell. So you can see we've got the two silicon semiconductors, the P-type, the positive stands for positive type, and then the N-type for negative. And then we've got electrical connections on either side to grab that those electrons that get moved around by when light hits the panels, and then it's all sealed up with glass and held together with an aluminum frame. And then this is just a layout. So we got a cell here, and then this is a layout of a whole panel. You've got the junction box, the back sheet. EVA is just a kind of a protective weatherproofing layer. So I'll do a rundown of the three types of solar cells that are most common. Start with the monocrystalline. Monocrystalline cells, basically what that means is that each cell in the panel is made from a single silicon crystal. This is an example of what a single silicon crystal looks like. They're massive. These aren't found naturally like this, but they can be manufactured. The manufacturing process is pretty intensive compared to some of the other methods for making cells. Some of the pros of monocrystalline panels, they have a higher efficiency rating, and they have a longer lifespan. Some of the cons, they're more expensive than some of the other variations, and they are less sustainable. The production process does require more energy. Another common type of panel is the polycrystalline. Unlike monocrystalline, which is made from a single cell, polycrystalline is multiple cells. They basically take a whole bunch of pieces of silicone and heat them up and turn them into a cell, but all the little individual crystals maintain their structure as opposed to becoming a uniform structure. You can kind of see that here on the right. They are less expensive than monocrystalline, and the production is more sustainable. It's not as energy intensive. One of the cons, though, is that it is less efficient than monocrystalline, and it does have a shorter lifespan. Monocrystalline and polycrystalline are the two types that you will see in residential use for the most part. The third type is the thin film photovoltaic panels. These are the types that you'll generally see in large solar farm operations, just because they are very cost effective, and you can make up for the lack of efficiency with a lot of land. If you've got a lot of land, then you can skimp on investing in panels and just make up for it by the number of panels that you have. These are produced by actually spraying as opposed to heating up and making semiconductor wafers like the polycrystalline and monocrystalline. These are actually sprayed onto a glass backer. A company called First Solar is the dominant producer of thin cell photovoltaics worldwide, and they use a cadmium tellurium mixture. There are all kinds of, typically the positive and negative is provided by boron and phosphorus. That's what you see in a lot of cells, but you can make all kinds of semiconductors with different elements that will capture different wavelengths of the light spectrum. And I forgot to mention, if we go back to monocrystalline panels, they have a lifespan of generally 25 to 35 years. And the average efficiency for monocrystalline is 22 to 27%. As far as polycrystalline, They have efficiency ratings of between 15 and 22%, and they can last anywhere between 23 and 27 years on average. And thin film photovoltaics, their efficiency rating can be as low as 7% and as high as 22%. And they usually last between 10 and 15 years. I'll give you a quick rundown on PV cell production, and I'll just use monocrystalline as an example. So the first step is they extract quartz sand and put it into an arc furnace. If you want to see something wild, look these up on YouTube. It's like a fireworks display in a can. Basically, these are three electrodes that are carrying a lot of power, and they get inserted into the sand and they melt it. And this is kind of a cross section of that process. As you go farther down into this pit, the temperature gets hotter, and that heating process also purifies the silicone and gets rid of impurities. And then the pure liquid silicone is discharged. After you have that discharge, after you've purified that silicone, that goes into this furnace here. Basically, this is a kind of showing you the process here. You basically have a seed crystal and then your molten silicone. That seed crystal gets lowered into the molten silicone, and then this whole platform is lowered. And as it lowers, the seed crystal provides the basis for which the rest of the crystal kind of builds itself around. So yeah, you got your silicone melt, the crystal gets inserted, and then the entire crucible, I guess, gets lowered, and the crystal kind of gets pulled out of it like magic. And then more silicone is added to fill that crucible back up. Some examples of large-scale photovoltaic applications. Let's see. Okay, yes, this was a picture that I showed earlier. This is the MBR solar park near Dubai. This particular park spans 30 square miles and is being built in phases. When phase 5 is completed, it will be the largest single site solar plant in the world with an estimated capacity of 5,000 megawatts. This is the Badla solar park in India, and I thought this was really cool just because you could see the progress. These are satellite photographs. 2016, not much going on, but by the time 2020 rolled around, the development was pretty extensive. It has a production capacity, a power production capacity of 2,245 megawatts and covers roughly 57 square kilometers. And this is that picture I showed earlier of the Anhui floating solar park in China. I wasn't able to track down any solid numbers on its power production, but I just thought that design concept was really innovative, and just the fact that it helps to keep the panel efficiency ratings higher because they're not operating at such high temperatures. Small photovoltaic applications, obviously homes and businesses, although you don't really see them on businesses very often. It's generally residential. Car charging stations, there are quite a few of these in Europe. Not as many in the US, but hopefully that'll start to change. And you can, when it comes to residential applications, you can either power your entire house off of solar, or you can use solar to power specific appliances in your home, maybe like a hot water heater, or other appliances that you want powered by solar. Whenever you have solar panels installed, you also need to install an inverter that converts the power generated from DC to AC. One thing to consider is you can either have one inverter that handles all of your panels, or each panel can have an individual inverter. I would recommend having an inverter for each panel, because if you only have one inverter, then it is anytime there's partial shade on one of your panels, the inverter basically has to drop to the lowest denominator and provide power based on I didn't quite fully understand the concept, but basically if you have an inverter on each panel, it maximizes the amount of power you can get as opposed to just having one inverter for your entire solar system. This was another statistic I thought was interesting. This just shows the installed photovoltaics capacity per capita. And Germany, which we saw on that other map, was high up there for power production, and it's also #1 for power production per inhabitant. Yeah, they pretty much blow everybody else away. But I thought that was pretty interesting. This was something else I found. I'd highly recommend checking out the NREL website if you're looking for more information on solar. They're a really good resource and they provide a lot of information. Basically, I wanted to show this to demonstrate the advances in how quickly we've been able to increase solar efficiency. So here we have single cell non-concentrator. That's basically the monocrystalline panel that I was talking about, or monocrystalline photocell that I was talking about earlier. That was developed around 1977. And then over here we have the perovskite cells, which were developed in 2013. And they both pretty much, so this is time, and then here we have efficiency percentages. They both start roughly around 14% when each was introduced. Let's see, and then here's kind of where they both are today, and they're both right around roughly 26%. You know, we got 26.1 and 25.5. But the perovskite was able to accomplish that in 7 years, as opposed to single crystal, which it took, I think, 22 years. I think I stopped here just because it kind of flatlined for a long time. But I just thought that was kind of cool. You know, the panels that are being introduced more recently are gaining efficiency at a much faster rate than some of the cells that were introduced earlier. So when you're deciding whether or not to choose to use solar on your home, there are definitely some practical considerations. One is geographic location. Obviously, you know, sunlight isn't spread equally across the United States. So you'll want to take that into consideration when choosing solar. And then if you've decided that your area gets enough sunlight to make solar worth it, you need to also determine how your home is oriented. Generally, you want at least one part of your roof to be facing south, because that's where you'll get the most sunlight exposure. And the angle is not as much of an issue because the mounting brackets can make up for the angle of your roof if it's too sloped. Not so much if it's too steep, but you can kind of work around that more easily than you can the direction of your roof. This was a chart that I found really useful. We've got the orientation of your roof and then the tilt, and it kind of shows you where the sweet spot is. You want to, you know, if you can be facing directly south and at about, let's see, 30 degrees or so, or yeah, between 30 and 40 degrees. That's kind of your ideal orientation and angle. I mean, you've got a lot of you know, you can, let's see, yeah, you can be, 15 degrees either way and still be fine. But I just thought this was a really useful chart for kind of determining what your maximum efficiency can be. This is another great NREL. This is just kind of further showing the amount of irradiance in the United States. This is the average over the course of a year. You can obviously see that the Southwest gets the most exposure, and then it kind of decreases as you move out from there. And this is measured in kilowatt hours per meter squared per day. And then I was able to go from there, and this is just that same map, but instead of showing the annual average, it shows my month the average sunlight. So we've got January, April, May to August, September to December. So yeah, April through September or August, you've got pretty good coverage through most of the US. And then, obviously during the winter months, it really drops down rapidly. Other practical considerations, the available space that you have, that'll determine what kind of panels you're going to use. I've heard that recently the efficiency differences between monocell and polycell have gotten closer together. Polycells have become more efficient and more appealing just because they have a lower cost, and they're not as their production isn't as detrimental to the environment as monocell. And then your budget is another consideration. The average residential photovoltaic system, it costs between $16,000 and $21,000. That being said, there are a lot of tax incentives and leasing options that can greatly reduce initial expense. Many companies also have solar calculators that help consumers determine what size system works best to meet their needs. There are also the current tax credit in 2021 is 22% of the cost at 60 cents per watt rebate. Oh, no, I apologize. Yeah, okay, so for the tax credit is 22% of cost, and then Duke Energy offers a 60-cent per watt rebate for systems up to 10 kilowatts. I've heard that for the first half of 2021, they've already given out all the rebates that they're going to, but there might be some available for the second half of 2021. I think they limit the number of rebates that they give out every year. And then the final consideration is energy goals. The consumer's energy goals will affect the price of their system. Systems that are built to offset energy from the grid will cost less, but there will still be a monthly energy bill. Systems built to meet the complete energy needs of a home will be more costly, but energy savings will make up for those costs within a few years. The average residential photovoltaic system takes between 8 and 16 years to pay itself off. And then in regards to whether or not to install your own system, if you've got the know-how and the experience dealing with electrical and you've researched it, then I wouldn't discourage it. But the installation cost is roughly 10% of the cost of the system, and you can make up for that by getting multiple bids. If you shop around, you can easily get a 10% price difference between different companies, and in that case, it's good to have somebody installing your system who's done it many times before and knows what they're doing. So you can easily make up for that price difference just by shopping around. As far as maintenance goes, one great thing about photovoltaic is it really doesn't require much maintenance beyond cleaning. And you can just do that with water or, water and a squeegee. Just get up on your roof every so often and give them a little clean. The other thing that you do want to keep an eye out is power output. That combined with how old your system is gives you a good idea of when you might need to replace your system. It's usually when the output drops by about 20% and you're at your type of panel's end of life expectancy, then that's when you want to consider switching your panels out for new ones. Yeah, and like I just said, those are the two factors that determine whether or not you want to get new panels: is age and energy output. That's actually one of the disadvantages of photovoltaics is there's not a lot of resources for recycling photovoltaic panels, unfortunately. There are several recycling firms in the US that are recommended by the Solar Energy Industries Association, including Cascade Eco Minerals. Currently, North Carolina regulates the disposal of panels based on whether those panels are considered hazardous or non-hazardous, and that just depends on what types of materials the panels are doped with to create the semiconductors. The North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality does operate a recycling markets directory website that can put citizens in touch with organizations able to recycle their panels. The recycled materials are either reused to produce new solar panels or they're repurposed and turned into other products. Unfortunately, the majority of panels in the United States are not recycled. So the advantages of photovoltaic power: it reduces your dependency on fossil fuels for your energy needs. It also reduces your energy costs, and it also gives you the chance to add energy back to the grid. They're totally silent. They have a pretty long lifespan depending on what kind of panels you get. They really don't have any maintenance beyond cleaning until you need to replace your panels. They can definitely increase your property value. That's just a given. And then the availability of silicone, it's the second most abundant element on the planet. So I predict we'll be making them for quite a long time. The disadvantages are acquiring the raw materials. You got to mine for the quartz sand, and that can have some damaging effects on the environment. And then the other disadvantage is disposal. You can see here, and like I said, most panels in the United States are not recycled; they're just thrown away. Some innovative photovoltaic technologies that I came across were photovoltaic paint. That one is not ready for the commercial market yet, but there are several types of photovoltaic paint being developed. So I predict one of those at least will become commercially viable. And that's basically just what it sounds like. It's a special type of paint. You put it on a surface and then hook it up electrically, and it can generate power for you just like a solar panel would. And then the other innovative solar technology, is solar in part, I guess, is wireless energy transmission. The Japanese Space Agency has been working on this at least since 2016. And basically the concept is you send a satellite into space with a very large array of solar panels, and it will collect the sunlight's energy without having to deal with the atmosphere, and then beam that energy, convert that energy into a microwave, and then beam it down towards the earth where it can be collected. In 2016, the agency successfully transferred energy equivalent to 10 kilowatts using a microwave unit. The transmission distance is only 500 meters, which is nothing compared to the thickness of the atmosphere, which is more than 480 kilometers. But it does show progress. So I thought that was exciting if that's something they can turn into a viable energy source. And why I would use solar, I still would, despite some of the disadvantages and initial costs, just because you can use tax credits and incentives to help reduce those initial costs. You can also lease. It's silent, and it increases your property value, and it's better for the environment. And those are some of my sources. Thank you.
Wow, Ben, you've done a really good job. So I want everybody to keep this in mind. I will post the recording of Ben's of his presentation. Try to take a look at that. unfortunately, we've run out of time, but I think you did an excellent bang up job. We just gotta, unfortunately, I'm sorry. So try to watch this and try to watch it and be ready to ask questions on Monday for Ben. So Ben, you're gonna be up a little bit again on Monday if that's okay. But
Sounds good.
a lot of good information, a lot of great information. So
Thank you.
sorry, I understand that some of you guys have classes now. So again, I'm sorry. We will reconvene on Monday. Have a good weekend.
Adios.